I've known Steve for many years. He's been giving this talk at Nuts and Bolts for probably 10 years now. I think you get your 10-year pin. And I'll let him explain how much money he's actually raised over the years. His bio is on the website, and without further ado, take it over, Steve. Right?
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Do I have any echoes or things like that? Is it pretty good? Okay. So, Joe, let's go to the this presentation slide. Yeah, this presentation. So, who am I? Who are you talking to? It's been quite a while since I've been doing this this class. Unfortunately, I was not able to physically be present because of some personal circumstances. I apologize for that. I as a rule, I'm always there. But let's make this work. So I'm a former CEO and a current entrepreneur and investor. I sit on public and private boards today. I'm pretty active in Techstars, which started in Colorado and is now nationwide, including Boston. And I mentor CEOs and I mentor startups as an angel. I also work with venture capitalists to do litmus testing. I go and take a look at companies, and if I like it, they tend to like it too. I have raised, yes, question. I'm right now on an island off of Florida called Isla Morada. And back of me, you would see the ocean, but it's getting dark, so we put up a sheet instead. Yeah, where I am, it hasn't gone under 80 degrees all winter. Sorry. So my background, I have an undergraduate in mechanical engineering, a master's in EE, and a master's of science and management, one of those from MIT. I have raised over $250 million in one company alone in the late 90s and early 2000s. I used to be the chief engineer at Sprint. I worked at Bell Laboratories. I was chief operating officer of Time Warner Telecom in its early days. I was an executive vice president of Bay Networks when Bay was bigger than Cisco. And then I did my own startup. I was CEO of a startup called Cyrus Systems. And Cyrus was interesting. We went from Series A to $5 billion valuation in 15 months. That was, I think, a record in value creation, according to Credit Suisse and Merrill Lynch. We didn't go IPO. We sold out right before IPO. We did a semi-IPO. So that's who I am. You guys, because you're in the class, I assume have an interest in potentially becoming a captain of industry. And the way I like to operate is ask me questions. I have a narrow field of vision. I can see people in the middle. I can see you wave hands to stop. Yeah, like that, if you have a question. Do you have a question?
The value was $5 billion in 15 months, is that right?
I'm going to need Joe to relay that because I can't hear you. Billion with the B.
Right. And then he said that was a record for value creation. Did he get somebody to buy it for $5? I mean, what's he mean by value?
How did you determine the $5 billion? Did somebody buy it for $5 billion?
No, we did a convertible debt round. But what you do when you raise money is you raise money at a valuation you would like, and then the people who give you money say, well, I don't like that. You're not worth that much. I want more of your company for less money. And so you go back and forth on a negotiation basis. So we rose in our valuation from 18 million to 200 million to 500 million to over $1 billion and then $5 billion in rapid succession. And and the last one was negotiated between major banks and us as part of a convertible debt. And it's a complicated offering, but that's how you establish valuation. Your buyers want you cheap, and you want your company to be worth a lot. So that's where the negotiation occurs. So please ask me questions like that. Ask me questions about how to form a team. There's a lot of sensitive founder issues that pop up all through the lifespan of a startup. Exit. When do you exit? How do you value? To your question, how do you value the company? Yes, question.
That is made up by us.
How do you get an experienced co-founder into your company that might be made up of students like in the audience? How would they get you to join their company, for example?
How would they get just any experience? Yeah, the easiest way to do that is go to angel forums and try to get angels to invest in you. And I'm going to cover that later, actually. Let's put that question off because I need to talk about later the difference between angel investors and venture capital investment and why I think it's appropriate at different stages to have both kinds of money. Okay? You can also ask me about mergers and acquisitions. I have led the team that sold Bay Networks to Nortel. It was a $7 billion valuation merger. I ran the merger, and I've also sold smaller companies and sold them. There's questions about stock strategy. What do you do when you join a startup or creating a startup? Do you give out a lot of stock? Do you give out cash? When do you preserve stock? Because stock can be much more valuable than cash, for example. So these kind of questions I can go into. Let's go to the startup slide. The startup. So from an investor's point of view, from my point of view, really 1 out of 10 startups succeed. And what do I mean by succeed? You'll hear a term when people invest in companies, did you get your 10x? 10x meaning 10 times what I put into it. Startups are high risk. So when you put money into a high risk endeavor, you expect more than a 6% return on your money. You expect something more. And if you do invest in companies, you need a broad portfolio. And hopefully one of those out of 10 investments are going to be a 10x return that can pay for all 9 other investments I might have made on companies that either cratered or kind of, meddling along. Maybe I get my money back. Maybe I get 1.5 times my money back, but I'm really looking for that 10x. That means you need to be thinking about any company you work for or start up. Are we going to be a major success? Are we going to provide 10x or 100x the return on investment? Is this a Facebook or an Apple or a Google? Something big. So that means you got to think big. That means your product has to be big. You have to have a significant enough market to generate a 10x return. So like I say here in the slide, 3 out of 10 companies can yield 2 to 4x in 4 to 7 years. That's okay, and I'll take it, but I'm really looking for that 10x. 6 will shut down completely. So the odds aren't really with you. 60% chances the company dies. So, excuse me. So that's okay. You pick up your bags and you move on to the next startup. Questions you can be thinking about, excuse me. Questions that an investor will ask you is, your idea is interesting. Why won't a big company build what you're building? The answer should be, a big company could build what you're building, but it won't be any good. It won't be any good because a big company will build it more slowly than you will, with older, they tend to be more conservative. I'm sorry, guys. Something went down the wrong way. Let me give you an example. When I was at Bay Networks, we built routers and router blades that go into racks of equipment. And our heartbeat was, let's get a new blade out in maybe 9 months. 9 months is good. It's aggressive for a large company to come out with a new blade that goes into a rack of equipment. A startup can get that done in half that time. How is that possible? We're a big company. We have lots of money. We have great engineers. That's true. But our engineers have nice benefits. They work 9 to 5. If you're lucky, an hour or two overtime. They have lives to live, and our, suppliers have lives to live, and they want to live, a decent life. A startup is not that. A startup will only survive by your ability, if it's hardware or even software, to get the job done faster, better, quicker, cheaper than any big company. So eyeballs in the market looking at a new device or software see you first because you beat all the big, slow, lumbering companies. That's the whole idea of a startup. If you don't have that in mind, then you're a lifestyle business, meaning you're lucky if you have a nice return that pays salaries, but you're not going to be a big 10x return. So you got to beat the big guys. The only way to do that is by burning the candle, working just like Facebook's early days. Be ready to camp out, and sleep at work, get your device out before anybody else can think of it. And it doesn't even have to be a new idea. If we wanted to acquire a company, all they had to do was use off-the-shelf stuff and integrate it faster than we could integrate it. And they get a lot of marketing share. They get a lot of eyeballs on what they're trying to do. That captures my attention, and rather than go, let's build this while we can't afford to build it, these guys have already beat us. They already have this product in the market. Let's go buy that company. That's how you get acquired. Next slide is getting money. Okay. Some, if not most of you in there, are engineers. You've heard the concept of signal to noise. Signal to noise is a great concept because in my world of startups and technology, there is a lot of noise. It's almost all noise. The very few companies that get any attention paid to them at all punch through that noise with a very strong signal. It's your job to figure out how to create a signal strong enough to punch through the vast amounts of noise there are. An angel or a VC will see hundreds of decks across my desk. These decks will have lots of information. I'm not going to have time to look at it. You better capture my attention in the first page, or it's going to go in the circular file behind me. So think about how to make signal to get through all the venture capital noise. If you meet somebody who is interesting to you as an investor, even as a hire, you have to have a good elevator pitch. I'm sure you guys have discussed what the concept of elevator pitches are. And here on my PowerPoint, I have a vanilla elevator pitch. And this is from Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore's book. I wouldn't say it exactly like this, but you have to get these points across. For whoever you're trying to sell to, who are unhappy with what they have today, our product, call it, name it, the technology, whatever it's called, is brand new. It punches through everything else out there, and it provides this new solution to your problem. And unlike all the guys who think they're like me and name them, we have done it this way and then explain what you've done. That's a crude elevator pitch. You can get fancier, you can get more creative, but essentially you have to get these points across. What do you do? What's the pain you're solving? Who are your competitors? And do it real quick. And you notice there's no real technology in there. You don't have to talk about performance metrics and things like that because it's not important when you first do an elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is to make the person you're talking to greedy. And it sounds bad. Oh no, it sounds like, Wall Street. But the only way to get people excited about what you're doing is if they think, what can this do for me? And me meaning, I want to buy this for my company. I want to join your company. I want to give you money so you can give me a percentage of your company because I want to be part of this. It's going to make money. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be big. So the elevator pitch has got to grab me by the neck and shake me around so that I'm going, I'm listening. I'm very interested in what you just said. And you really only have one shot to do this, because if you didn't catch them in the first 60 seconds, they're going to go, very interesting, call my office, thank you for your input, and then never talk to you again, because they're looking for the person who can grab them by the neck. There's a quote here, actually from Mark Twain. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. What I usually find with folks who haven't been trained on what I'm talking about here is they will take 10 minutes to try to describe what they're doing, and I'm trying to get away because they haven't grabbed me. So you've got to actually spend a long time refining a message to create your elevator pitch. You have to practice it on many people. You have to try different wordings. You have to eliminate words so that you're really crisp, because that is your signal punching through a wall of noise. Okay, the next slide, the pitch, KISS, everybody's heard that. Keep it simple and stupid. You will be amazed at how simple and stupid you've got to make your pitch. Unless you know for a fact the person you're talking to is an industry expert in what you are doing, and that's rarely the case. Even if they say they are an expert, they're rarely truly an expert. You've got to dumb it down to third grade level. And seriously, I mean, third grade. Most good books are written at third grade level. You have to do that. You have to have a hook. That statement, that first statement, the first thing out of your mouth that really catches someone by the mouth and pulls them in. And again, it goes back to greed. Describe a huge opportunity that they're interested in. It's when you give a pitch or presentation, know who your audience is. It's really important to know their backgrounds. If it's a VC, who have they invested in? So who are they likely to compare you against? What technologies do they think you're capable of? Their questions to you will be based on that. So the more you know about your target audience, the more likely you're going to be interesting to them. But you got to target the lowest common denominator. It's not uncommon to be in an investor VC meeting and half the room gets up and walks out because you pitched it at a level too high or to their one expert. You're assuming too much industry knowledge for 95% of most investors. You're going to think, well, you know, I'm going to do a cloud-based platform here. I'm assuming these guys know all the buzzwords, so I'm gonna really impress them with my knowledge. Don't do that. If you impress them with your knowledge, they will get up and walk away because you've misjudged your ability to pitch, especially to investors. Keep it really dumb. Use terms that are basic. If they want you to go deep, they will ask questions that make you go deep. And even then, you don't want to go too deep because you're going to alienate some of the folks who don't know what the one investor is talking about. By the way, venture capitalists are competitive with each other. And the fact that one person may know more than the other, don't cater to that one person who knows more. You're going to alienate the others in the room. So keep it low. If they really want to dig deep into technology with you or details, say that's a great question. May I cover that a little bit later at the end or privately with you, and then move on with the presentation. Okay, keep it short. Spend a lot of time figuring out how to keep your pitch short. Any of you guys in the room know what the 10, 20, 30 rule is? No hands? Okay, then you've heard it. It's the Guy Kawasaki rule, right? 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. And it's, you know, who can get anything done then? You're lucky if you can get through a slide in 2 minutes. And 20 minutes is all the time you really have to give your pitch, because expect to have another 20 minutes or more, 30 minutes of Q&A and follow-up. If you did a good job, there's going to be a lot of questions during it and afterwards. And then 30-point font, meaning don't drown the audience with technical details, with Venn diagrams and charts and ASICs and, you know, chip layouts and stuff like that. Keep it really simple, because you're trying to hook them with bait. Once you've hooked them, you'll have many more meetings to go over lots of detail. That first meeting has to be really high level. Have a lot of pictures. I mean, just simple pictures explaining the concept of what you're trying to do. Even stick figures are better than no pictures at all. I think I mentioned this earlier. If someone tries to dig down into detail, there's usually one subject matter expert in a venture capital meeting in that room. It's usually a junior associate. And that junior associate who's trying to become the full VC will try to get you, just to show his or her bosses, look what I know. I did my homework. I'm going to get these guys. And they'll ask you a curveball question to try to trip you up or just demonstrate how much they know. Try not to answer the question. If you do have the answer and it's a short answer, spit it out in a sentence and then say, and we will talk about more about this later. Put a period on that, because they love to dig down into, you know, rabbit holes with you and turn off the rest of the investors. So be careful and watch out for that. But the last point here, I think, is really maybe the most important. They're not just listening to the logic and facts and reasons and interesting ideas coming out of your mouth. They're looking for the leader to have passion, charisma, engagement, the ability for the leader to sell this not just to investors, but to buyers. That's sales 101. And I know most of you are thinking, I don't want to be a salesman. The leader, the CEO, the founder of any company is mostly sales up front. You've got to be able to get people to believe in you, believe in your vision, believe in your company, want to give you money, want to join the company, want to buy your company after you've been going for a while. It's very important. So we're going to talk a little bit later about how you emulate charisma, because some of you may not be born with charisma, but I guarantee every one of you can emulate charisma. I am sure you are, but what you'll find is, as you're giving pitches, as you're testing your ideas, you'll fall into some common mistakes and habits that people like me, who are born an introvert, and I am an introvert, had to learn to emulate certain behaviors to be perceived as more charismatic. So, next slide is basic anatomy. And you know, I don't want to go into detail on all these things, but the basic anatomy of any presentation, of any business plan, for example, has to cover these items. We talked about a hook. You need the hook. You need to offer the solution. Now, you'll hear other people say, the magic, the technology, say that for the end. I don't believe that. The audience I'm talking to here likely is going to have some form of an idea that is based on some form of technology. That's the magic. That's all I'm interested in, is getting involved with and investing in companies with a new kind of technology magic. So you have to tell me a little bit about it up front, or I will lose it. I'll get impatient and just ask you, what is this? Is it a new blade? Is it a new chip? Is it software? Are you leveraging cloud? You know, smartphone technology? Whatever it is, I'm going to want you to kind of get to that punchline. So tease that right up front. Then talk about the other things. Next, I have here, what is your fundamental business model? How are you going to market it? How are you going to go to market with this technology? Who is your competition? I might put competition higher, address it earlier before business model, because the next thing out of my mind is going to be, isn't so-and-so doing what you're doing? How is that new? Then you have to address competition up front with people like me. Who's the management team? Who am I investing in? What experience do you have? Got to be addressed. Financials, I'm looking for, you know, $750,000 that are going to last me a runway for 12 months until 3 months post-revenue. Things like that. That's a status and timeline also. I'm going to have, you know, beta software available in 4 months, and we're going to go to market with that 3 months after that. And finally, the offer. A lot of people forget when they're talking to investors, they're asking for money. Instead, they just say, here's what I'm doing, and here's the team, and it's great. Call me. And they forget to say, oh, I would like from you $2 million on these terms. I'll give you 40% of the company for $2 million. They want to see your terms and what your expectations are. Let's talk a little bit more about that first item, though, the hook. The hook, or the elevator pitch, or whatever opportunity you have. 7 seconds. You really have to have and say in 7 seconds something interesting enough for me not to keep walking away. So the first thing you should say is something that describes a pain that I'm aware of, or could be made aware of quickly, that is interesting, because you wouldn't be talking to me unless you had a solution to that pain. Pain's got to be significant. Significant. Preferably a huge market. You know, a multi-billion-dollar market is always nice. And then you have to say that in a way that kind of grabs my neck. And I have, you know, some imaginary examples up here. Imagine a safe rubber coating that conducts electricity. I've never heard of that. That's not even possible. How are you doing that? That's my response. You have my interest. You hooked me. Good job. One of my companies I sold a few years ago built a device to help people who feel threatened, targeting for young professional women in dark alleyways walking to their cars, for example. A button you push, you pull up a call center with GPS. Have you ever felt threatened in any way? Yeah, I have felt threatened. What have you got for me? The old standby in my early career is our boxes 10 times faster, cheaper, smaller, less heat. We have another generation of a product that does this, and we did it 6 months before anybody else, and a 9-month heartbeat. Another example, do you get poor cell phone reception at home or at work? Yes, I do. You have a device that fixes that. This is the hook. You have to practice this. You have to think about it. You have to have people give you honest feedback who says, I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not interesting to me. You have to rethink it until that hook is right. The next slide, no geek speak. When I say no geek speak, it's very common, if not the rule, for people with a technology background to hit me up with specs and industry jargon that I don't understand, even though, you know, I've got engineering degrees. So you have to work to avoid that. I have an example here of things that look impressive, you know. Scan and digitize bound documents at 1,200 pages per minute, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You've lost me. At the very beginning, you've lost me because it doesn't sound interesting. I have to think too hard about why this is interesting to me And the more you make an investor think, the more likely they're going to walk away because they don't have time to think hard. It's your job to make it sound easy that they can make a lot of money, and if they just write you a check right now. So keep your pitch, again, simple to understand. Next slide, focus of pitch. The focus of the pitch should be on customer benefits, not the technology benefits. You should have the person you're talking to want to ask you, this is great, I don't believe you. How are you going to do what you're saying you're going to do? Well, if I ask that question, I'm going to give you plenty of time to answer it with technology. So don't hit technology up first. Say, we solved this massive problem that everybody knows about, and we did it. Really? Come on, how? That's the question you want. How did you do it? So there's a so what to technology. Saying and by the way, the biggest companies today, the ones you all know about, are terrible at this. Look at their ordinary Marcom communications documents that they will sell you or give to you to sell you product. It's terrible. They say, oh, our new generation of technology has improved network utilization. I don't care. How does that affect my bottom line? It's scalable, adaptable. So what? What does it mean? If you can say I can plug in widget X that I want to plug in, just say we can plug in widget X. Secure integration, seamless integration. These are things right out of every marketing communications document. So talk about what pain you solve, what pain you reduce. Increase revenues by 60%. Okay, you have my attention. 34% cost reduction in 12 months. Perfect. Then I'll ask you how you do that later. But that's solving problems. That's pain reduction. Next slide, style. When you're giving a pitch to raise money, and it's your company, you should give the pitch, unless someone's honest enough to tell you you're terrible, and we don't have time to train you how to give a better pitch. So use the best presenter. It should be the founder or the CEO. If you are the wizard who understands the magic, great, you're in the room already. But if you're not, if you're the CEO who put together a great team with the magic, have that talent in the room to be able to answer questions. But keep a tight rope on their necks, because they sometimes they want to go off and spend 10 minutes bragging about their great magic. Don't let that happen. Let them answer it quickly if you want to take that risk, and then move on, because the worst thing that can happen in these meetings is to get bogged down in minutia and detail that are irrelevant to you landing an investment. It's important to give firm answers. I don't care if you have the answer or not. Give a firm answer. If you don't have the answer, say it firmly. I don't know. Good question. I will get back to you in 24 hours with the answer, and move on. Don't get tripped up, and don't go, yeah, let me make a phone call, or, hey, bring in so-and-so and let's go. Move on, just be firm about it. If you have the answer, be firm and give the firm answer. But if you don't, be firm and confident about that. When I talked about earlier about emulating charisma, you take classes in this, actually. I've attended a ton of classes. Back when I was at AT&T, when it employed 1 million people and when it was the world's largest monopoly, they sent management to training all day long. It was great. Often companies won't put that kind of money into people anymore, but if you can go to a class like Communispond, where you learn to stand up with your back straight and look people in the eye, shake hands firmly, enunciate, try not to use the word, which we all do, but you can be trained not to, go do that. It's worth a lot. So I say little things like look at everyone in the room. There's things called scanning where you look from left to right so that nobody feels left out. And, oh, the presenter, he or she never looked at me. I don't like that person because they didn't look at me. These things actually happen. You have to make sure you scan the room. And if the subject matter is important for everybody to keep up with you, you should stop presenting, look at everybody in the room, and say, is this clear? How am I doing? Any questions from you? Keep pulling people in. If they're investors and they start looking away or texting on their iPhone, you've lost them. Look at them in the eye, pull them back into the meeting, and say, Janet, I know that you have an interest here. I want to make sure I'm being clear. Do you have any questions? Make them put down their iPhone or Android and look at you and pay attention again. It's very important to have these kind of basic skills. I talked about doing your homework, making sure you understood who the people in the room are, what their backgrounds are, where they went to school, what companies have invested in, what companies have failed near what you're trying to do, why you're different from other companies that have invested in. Knowing your homework will impress them and also make you more effective. And I talked about pulling questions out of the audience already. Okay, let's go to the next slide, pitch examples. I'm going to show you a couple of pitch examples very briefly of what not to do and what to do. The next slide is called CyberX LLP. This is a real pitch. It's kind of a random but real pitch I had several years ago. I changed the name so you hopefully can't tell who it is, but this is exactly what they pitched, other than a few word changes. The next slide is the executive summary. This is the executive summary here. Take a look at that and tell me if you can tell anything about what this company is doing, because I sure couldn't. It's a timeline, which is not really important to me. And it talks about proprietary message security processing technologies using eMessage DNA. eMessage DNA is not an industry term. I have no idea what they're talking about. And it kind of goes on like that. And then they talk, by the way, this pitch was given to me in 2003. So this pitch has future years, and they're talking about how much market share they're going to, boasting about how great they're going to be. This is insulting to an investor. The next slide is CyberX people. And it's fine to have a listing of people in your company, but don't do that before anybody understands what you're trying to do. First, make sure people understand what you're trying to do. And they have a huge advisory board, but advisory boards, save that for the end. The next slide is called Sentinel E-Strand Technology. I'm still trying to figure out what this company does. So they have an E-strand and a Sentinel, and there's a DNA in there. I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. Something to do with DNA, iStat. I see the word iStat, and iStat technology supersedes, including iStat powerful algorithm identify spam. Maybe this has something to do with spam? Is it possible? Is this a spam blocking company? The next slide is CyberX technology benefits. Complete cyber messaging solution. What is it? I'll stop here. This is a not good pitch, but I guarantee you these people put in a lot of effort and a lot of time preparing this pitch, thinking it's the best pitch in the world. They didn't follow some fundamental rules because they didn't understand the fundamental rules of how to get through to people effectively. The next slide is a few slides out of a company that I ran. I'm not saying this is a great pitch, because this pitch in particular was being proposed to telecommunications investors. It assumed substantial knowledge on the investors' part because all they did was telecom. But the slide after that shows metropolitan deployment of a fiber standard called Sonnet, which they understood. It just shows a picture of a nice growing market, and it was the year 2008. It showed past performance of this market. Good. Okay, that's a good trend. The next slide, why fiber is not widely deployed, gives just a few bullet points saying this is why you don't want to do the typical solution. These things, too much money, it's too far, too much money per cross section. Give reasons why you don't want to keep doing what you're doing today. And the next slide, why our fiber rings are deployed. I just give a few answers why ours are better, why it's inherently a superior choice. And then just flip through the next few slides because it shows the evolution of the technology and the solution we're trying to sell. And it shows things going a good way, more and more functionality. So make it digestible, make your figures of merit easy to understand and digest. And use pictures whenever possible. Let's go on to the slide called When to Raise Money. When do you raise money? When you don't need money. Because if you need money, you're going to get hurt. So the first thing you should do, if you have a going concern, is figure out when you run out of runway, when the plane has to take off because you have no more money to spend. And you want to start raising money at least 6 months before you run out of money, which is kind of a trick. Sometimes you can only get 6 months worth of money, which means as soon as you get the money, start your next round. If you wait until the very end, you get caught in a pinch. And investors understand that. And sometimes they'll play games with you and say, gee, looks like you're going to start running out of money. We're interested, though. Don't worry. We're going to have a check for you. You know, let's just keep working through our due diligence. We have more questions. And they'll wait and ask more questions and say, have you built this yet? Have you had any revenue? What's happening now? And they'll wait until all of a sudden you run out of money and you're starting to lay off your contractors, cutting back on hours of your full-time employees. Your product cycle slows down, and all of a sudden you're starting to smell like a dying company, and nobody wants to invest in a dying company. So it's a game you play. A lot of great companies with great ideas are dead now not because their idea wasn't good, because their product wasn't great. It's because they didn't understand the game of when to start raising money, and it's when you don't need it. So when you start launching your program to raise money, you got to do it simultaneously. You have to carpet bomb all the people who will give you money. Don't start with one VC or angel and work with them for 4 months thinking, you know, they promised me that they're going to invest in me. Have at least 4 pitches, maybe 6 or 8 going simultaneously, and it's a war, it's a campaign. You have to be courting a lot of people at the same time. What makes an investor write the check really quick when you want money from an investor? It's the thought that they might lose to another investor. If they know you've got multiple investors talking to you, interested in you, at any moment, one of them can lock you up and say, we have a binding agreement. Neither one of us are going to shop this for the next 15 days. We're going to work on the legal and the capital structure and the terms. And as soon as that happens, everyone else, you can't talk to anybody legally. They're gone. And you have a couple of weeks. If they ask for a month, say no. I'm not going to wait a month. That could kill us. You got 2 weeks. And then you work out terms. And then they give you the money and everybody else is gone. If people think that you are close to a deal, they'll say, hey, let's do a lockup. I only need 5 days. Don't sign with them, sign with me. Be a scarcity. Be introduced when possible is important. If you do cold calls with VCs, you're part of the noise. The way you punch through that with the signal is knowing somebody, is networking. If you have even an associate partner in the venture capital firm do the introduction for you, that can get you a full meeting with the full investment team. If you've met with one investor, but they say, we like what you do, it's interesting, but we never invest in what you're doing. That's out of our field. Say, if you like what we're doing, can you introduce us to Draper Fisher Jurvetson? Can you introduce us to Millennium Partners? Liberty. And if they're good, then they'll say, yeah, I'll make a phone call. And you get into the site, you get a quick meeting that way. Everybody likes a good deal, right? The deal you're looking for when you are trying to raise money is, I want to raise the most money and give up the least amount of the company as possible. I want to be a Zuckerberg. I want to own the majority of my company. I'll give you 10% if you give me $2 million. If you find a company, a venture firm or an angel that says, okay, I'll do that. I'll give you $2 million and I'll only take 10% of your company. You can keep 90% of the company. And then you have a major hitter, a top tier venture firm say, I'll give you $2 million, but I want 20%. Or maybe even 51%, because I want to be able to fire you. What do? Which do you take? The cheap money or the name brand money? It depends. Sometimes it's hard to walk away from really cheap money. But I can give you countless examples. And I just had a meeting with one in Denver a couple months ago of a company that raised $2 million from a sole angel investor. And my meeting came with them as they were dying. And they were flagellating. And I said, what happened here? And the angel was there saying, well, I gave them the $2 million because I gave them the best deal. But that person gave them no good advice on how to run the company, on what's important. They built the wrong product for the wrong market at the wrong time with great magic. They had wonderful technology, but they misstepped everywhere else. It was such sophomoric mistakes that any seasoned investor or a tier 1 VC would have turned them in the right direction. They would have pivoted correctly and been a great big company. So, make the calculation. But if you have to pay a big name 50% more stock, or even twice as much stock for the same amount of money, but it's a big, I see that, but if it's a big, you can benefit greatly from the networking, from the mergers and acquisitions experience, from all these things. Take the expensive money, because if you're a first-time CEO or founder, they're going to steer you away from brick walls, and you'll make a lot more money, even though you've given up more of the company. Okay, question?
Of advice. Do you have any background on that?
Okay, I think the question is you say it's name brand investors will be very helpful and give you good advice. Are there other ways of getting good advice other than through investors? Is that fair?
Equally good.
Or equally good? And so in other words, could you take cheaper money and find good advisors? Is that true? So did you get that?
I did.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and I might address it later, and I'll skip it later, but let's talk about that for a minute. Early on in a startup, you can get money from angels. Well, first of all, it's friends and family, like, you know, mom and dad or my rich uncle. Will you give me some money to bootstrap this thing? And you might get some there. They're not going to give you any good advice, though. Early on, you want to look for a good advisory board. These are gray hairs, seasoned people with all the scars to prove it. I've been there. If you can find them, incent them somehow. Give them a little bit of, you know, sprinkle some stock on them and get them to give you advice. But they're not going to really care that much because they don't have that much writing on it. The people who are going to help you the most are going to help you because they have money in you and they don't want to lose that money. They're going to be more assertive, more aggressive, making sure you don't step in that hole over there because they've stepped in that hole and you're walking towards that with my money in your hand. Don't step in that hole. They have more at play. So there's no way around it. You want people with skin in the game to help you. Angel investors, I believe, are your best bet early on. An angel will take less of your company's stock for more money, and they will jump into the ring and fight the bulls with you if they're good. They will meet with you regularly, every few weeks, every month. You can say, you know, we're stuck here. What do you think we should do? Well, I think you should go to this vendor. They're based out of Shenzhen. They can turn a board faster than anybody in the United States with your technology and chipsets. This is the kind of experience you need, but you have to get them to invest in you or they're not going to care. Yeah, I can help you, but frankly, I'm too busy. Unless you're going to make me money, you know, I'm not going to care as much. That's an angel. And they are willing to invest in you before your revenue, before your product ships. Later, you can go get big money on big terms from venture capitalists. VCs these days often expect your product to be shipping out the door or to see your, you know, your web-based service on a massively fast ramp rate of growth. But that's my only advice to you is you can have advisory boards. I find that generally they're not worth much. Generally, they're only worth bragging, we have so-and-so on our advisory board, but they're not really helping you. The people helping you will be angels. And then after that, VCs with the right background. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. Next slide, business basics. Anybody heard this acronym before? CFIMITYM. You get bonus karma points if you know what that means. Nobody? Cash flow is more important than your mother. It's sad to, you know, and I think I first heard this from Ken Morse at MIT, but it's bandied around. It's actually fairly well known in startup circles amongst the CFO crowds. The best thing that can happen to you as a startup is rapid growth. The worst thing that can happen to you as a startup is rapid growth. Rapid growth can kill you fast. You will find yourself upside down in your ability to pay off your manufacturers because your accounts receivable hasn't caught up yet, and suddenly you're bankrupt, even though you're growing massively with a bullet. So rent a good CFO. If you can't afford to have a full-time CFO, get someone to really give you good advice about how do you grow, because you have to grow correctly. There's a lot of companies that died because of this. Boston Market is a great example. Remember Boston Market? They were just exploding, and they got ahead of themselves on their payments. And suddenly they were caught. Nobody wanted to loan them money because they were behind on payments, and they went bankrupt in the middle of a massive growth spurt. That happens over and over and over again. Let's see. It's important to have a good business plan. Was one of the bullets earlier on the slide that I said you have to have. Important to have a good business plan. It shows that you've actually thought about all the things that have to go into a business plan. Having said that, venture capitalists and angels don't read business plans. Almost never. It's just a thick document that ends up on our desk, and we end up asking the questions we want directly to you. So you got a business plan, it will not be read. And the last point I want to make is flexibility. I recommend reading a book called The Lean Startup. Some of you may be familiar with that. It talks about a lot of the fundamentals of how do you run a startup well. And there's actually a process to running a startup. Part of that process is completely throwing away your idea and starting over again. And it happens to more than half of the startups I've ever worked with. What do I mean by that? You're well on your way, and all of a sudden you find a massive roadblock, a brick wall in front of you, and you can't figure out how to get around it. It could be a number of things. It could be somebody just took your idea and patented it, and your patent is invalid now. It could be a lot of things that got in your way, and it happens quite often. So what do? You pivot. You pivot on your heel quickly, left or right, to get around that barrier. Sometimes that pivot means you take 60% of all the work you've done, throw 40% of it away, and continue onto a new path, a new target that may even be a bigger target. The market may be more lucrative than what you ever dreamed of. One of the Techstars companies I'm dealing with right now, I convinced them they were going to hit a massive wall, and we pivoted the whole company early on quickly to a whole new direction that looks like it's going to be much bigger than their original founding idea. Okay, next page, success factors. These are some critical success factors that I have found in my experience. People talk a lot about intellectual property. One of the first questions out of investors' mouths is, do you have any patents? Are you going to protect your idea? Is your patent going to be US based? Is it Europe? Is it China? Where are you going to patent this thing? Very often, you may have a lot of patents. Very often, you'll find that you didn't need any patents at all. It didn't really matter. The thing that really matters is speed. Speed. If you are fast with an idea that can't be patented or shouldn't be patented because it's too expensive to protect it, doesn't matter. Be there first. Be there first with your big idea. Keep the momentum up. There's going to be a dozen people suddenly starting up right behind you going, holy cow, look what they just did. And there's no patent. Let's go get it. Doesn't matter. If you're first to market, if you're the first mover, you can outrun these other guys until they die. They run out of steam. They don't get any more money because you're too big. Your idea is being met, meeting the market's demands too effectively. So speed is almost always better than patents. Having said that, if your magic, truly is a world shaker and is patentable, get that patent. Have it. Because a lot of people won't invest in you without saying you have a patent. Mission. You may have some magic and some technology, but what are you going to do with it? You need to spend a lot of time brainstorming what exactly is the mission of your company. Is to take magic and do what? Create a service out of it, create a product out of it. You're going to service. You may have a target-rich environment of a lot of different people who are going to buy your product, but you can't service all of them. So define your mission very carefully and limit it as much as you can. Focus it as much as you can. The team. You'll hear a lot of VCs say, we don't invest in ideas, we invest in teams. Why would they say that? I mean, ideas are what's going to sell, not the team isn't what's being sold in the marketplace. A lot of savvy investors know that the product you're pitching is not the one you're going to sell. You're going to pivot. You're going to change your plans and your ideas and your technology. It's going to change. So what are they investing in? The team that thought of the idea, that's smart enough to see the brick wall in front of them, smart enough to change plans and their product to get around that wall or vector off and pivot into a 60-degree angle off to a different site. You really are investing in the team smart enough to either get that idea, original idea to market, or create different ideas to get around roadblocks nobody knows about yet. So that's why it's important for you to say, invest in me, don't worry, I'll hire everybody else. I'll get a salesperson and a marketing person, and all you need is the magic. It's not true. To go after VC money, you have to have a fully developed, mature team. To go after angel money, you need to say, I have a CFO, a CMO, a chief operations office. I have these people lined up. If you invest, they will come. That's often good enough to get money. It's even more important if they appear in the room and say, yes, you invest. I will join Fred or Jane here and be part of the team because I'm investing in a team. Some other things here. Where do you fit physically in the food chain? Just be aware that your technology may not be sold to end customers. They could be sold to different players on a supply chain. Not everything's mass market. Not everything is sold directly to the enterprise. They can be sold to intermediaries in a food chain, and you can make billion-dollar companies in that food chain. Other issues, customer requirements, commitment. When will you make it? What do you need to make it? It's harder to start up with a hardware company now because software is so cheap. You can have a cloud-based solution up and running fairly quickly. It'll take less money. If you need to make a box, it's going to take usually longer because of the spins of the boards and things like that. How much money will it cost you to get to revenue? That's a key metric. Be prepared to have that. We will be selling this product once we burn through $2 million. And everything beyond that is to help grow the company. And then how much money will you make us, the investors, and yourselves? Meaning you have to have some idea of, what your company could be worth based on net present value, based on earnings and dividends, things like that. By the way, I haven't talked about it. This is important. This is important. I'm an investor. I'm asking you right now, who's going to buy you? Who's going to buy your company? What is the right answer? Anybody know what the right answer is? The right answer is, we're not for sale, ever. We're going public. Why would you have to say that to an investor? Because if you say, we're going to get taken out, and here are the people who are going to buy us, you're not in it. You want to get acquired. You want to work for a few years and then punch out. You're not going to get money from an investor if your whole game plan is to work hard a few years and then, boom, I'm out of here. Because the company will fail. You're not thinking long term. You're thinking, how do I get acquired? It's vitally important for any of you in the audience never to say that we're a flip company. We're going to get flipped as fast as we can, and Google's going to buy us, or some desperate buyer is going to buy us who doesn't use the technology. You're committing suicide. If you think that way or say that, you are going public. You're going to go all the way. You're a Facebook. You're a Google. You're an Apple. And you're in it for the long haul. Now, having said what I just said, If you're successful, you're going to get offers. Chances are you will be acquired. Most successful startups get acquired before they go public. And that can be a great thing. But let the investors make you do that. The investors will say, you know, Bill or Janet, you've got to take this money because I want it right now. I invested in you. It's been 5 years. I want my return. Take this incredible offer and everybody's happy and you get your money and everybody gets theirs. It's the investor's job to push you that way. You shouldn't be actively seeking it unless your investors tell you to go sell the company, see what you're worth. Let the investors push that. Does that make sense to everybody, what I just said? Okay. Be willing to try again after failure. Well, the first bullet was, are you ready to do a startup experience? I kind of described what that means. Be willing to try again after failure. Investors like to invest in people who have failed. Why would that be? Yes, question.
So I wanted to ask a question about the last point you made about the getting bought out or doing an IPO. What if you're operating in a market where that's not a viable exit, where people don't do IPOs on companies that are not already making a lot of money, and where there are really no companies to buy you out? How do you pitch, how do you get funding for such a company?
Did you hear that, Steve?
Nope.
If you're an industry that where people don't go public and there aren't a lot of buyouts, how do we take that last advice that you gave about, you know, you're in it for the IPO? Is that?
Yes, absolute industry or region of the world, actually.
Or region of the world. We do have a range of people in the audience, from social developmental to biotech to wireless and all of that.
So you're saying if there's no market to take you public, what do? You're not going to get investors because investors have to cash out, and they either do that through. I'm sorry.
That, you know, if you're serving an industry where you have foundations, is that the kind of thing that?
So there are markets. I mean, in the US, people do IPOs on companies that are not making any money. But if you go to many developing countries, if you're going to do an IPO and you want the IPO to be successful, that company is going to already be making money. They're not going to double the investors or multiply the investors' investments by 10 in an IPO. Many developing countries don't work that way. And if you're starting something new, something disruptive in a developing country, you're probably also not going to get anyone to buy you out either. So how do you raise money in such situations?
That's probably a whole other set of discussions. Let me maybe see if you could follow up with you separately on that.
Okay, Steve, the bottom.
We've got.
We have one more slide.
Okay, excellent.
So the bottom line is, investors don't give you money out of goodwill unless you're a nonprofit going for goodwill. If you're a nonprofit, you say, please give me money because you're a good person and you're never going to see a penny of it back again. That's called charity. And there's a lot of companies that are formed to do nonprofit goodwill stuff and raise money, but they're not there to give returns to their investors. If you want to raise money to, you know, in the normal market, they've got to get their money back, either by going public or by getting acquired. End of discussion. That's it. Be willing to try again after failure. If you failed once, it means you're more valuable now than you were before because you have a lot of experience. Most people fail in startups. They jump from company to company, either to run the company or to work in that company. But you've learned a lot. So it is not the kiss of death to fail because most people have failed and you learn a lot from it. Okay, focus, focus, focus is the most important thing to concentrate on when you're running a company, because you're going to get so distracted by other pretty things that are floating by. Oh, let's go do that too, and let's build a widget, and if there's a feature that we can get this market, that's the kiss of death. You're going to spread yourself too thin and never get anything done. A lot of companies I've worked with or tried to raise money from me that were spread too thin, and they all died because they didn't focus on a narrow piece. The pie could be huge, but they're disciplined enough and mature enough to say, we're first going to carve this piece and we're going to eat it all. That's a good thing to do. And then we talked about taking help from your investors. Next slide. Bottom line is leadership wins. Leadership. You guys in the room, the founder, the CEO, you have to have these qualities. You have to develop them. You have to emulate them. If you go, yeah, I'm not really good at that stuff, get trained on it. If you pretend like you're an avatar jockey writing something that is not familiar to you, but you've got to learn how to emulate charisma and passion and all that, do it. Learn it. It is teachable. You can train yourself to be dynamic. You'd be shocked at how dynamic anybody can be. But you have to have these qualities in order to gain my confidence, the confidence in investors to say, I'm going to give you my money, and I'm pretty sure you know what to do with it. I think you can lead people. I think you can lead the industry, lead customers to the water, and get them to drink from the well. So that results in your call to action. Invest in my company. Here are my terms. I look forward to talking to you, and you will win the war. That's my my pitch. How much time do we have, Joe, for questions?
Probably we can do 5 minutes or so. In fact, we have a question.
So the question is, what are some of the thoughts on crowdsourcing? When do you do crowdsourcing, and what are the pros and cons of going after, like, Kickstarter or something like that versus VC versus angels?
Okay, we are going to have a panel where we'll talk about that, but let's ask Steve while he's here. The question is crowdsourcing. Do you have views on when the right time to do that, and any views on that topic?
It's very, very popular. I mean, people are talking Kickstarters helped a lot of companies early on. Yes, it has its place depending on what you're doing. Sometimes if you want a real stellar gold brand, you don't go crowdsource because it might cheapen your brand a little bit. But the earlier you do it, the better. You can always go from a crowdsource platform to a premium or gold brand later. So it's a big question. It depends on what you're doing and what stage you're in. But yes, there is absolutely a role for crowdsourcing, and an open source community is interesting too. Any other questions?
Very important to have a good team. What it actually means, good team? What is bad team? How do you know that the team should be improved, or the team is too big, or what means team?
What does it mean to have a good team? How do you know if you have the right people, the right size? How do you do that?
Well, first you have to have all the holes filled. You have to have marketing, you have to have sales, you have to have operations, engineering, your technologist. And people can fill multiple roles sometimes early on in the company, CFO. But it's their resume. It's how do they sell themselves to you? How much seasoning and experience do they have? People who give you money want to make sure they're giving it to a team that spends it wisely, frugally, is careful, has all these things we've been talking about. Focus, you're hitting the right market. So it's people who have experience. If you have no experience, it's going to be harder to get money. So that you have to kind of work down the value chain from there. The money you get is sort of directly dependent on the quality of the team as well as the idea.
One more question over here.
Most people, they talk about successes but not failures. Can you give us an example of one of your failed investments, and how did you move away? How did you move on?
Okay, can you give us an example of one of the investments you made that failed, And what did you do and how did you move on? You mean as a founder or as an investor?
Either.
Your biggest failure that you would care to reveal?
It's probably, it's always smart to take many bets if you're an angel. If you have too few bets, you don't eliminate the financial business risk platform, the alphas and betas. So, no, I had quite a few investments actually with common angels right there in the Boston area. Probably the biggest one was a medical gamble. Someone had a great platform for discovering orphan drugs to attack diseases, and it looked really smart, and they had a lot of big names associated with it, so I put my ante up with it. Medical is always expensive. Medical always takes 10 years, and you have multi-phases, and they can fail at any phase. Huge risks. So my lesson learned was that don't invest in medical if you're an angel unless you have a lot of money to throw away and don't care. Let the big boys and girls make the investments in medical. That's my example.
Time viewpoint, we probably ought to wrap up since we have the second half coming. Steve, I'm so glad we could do this, and I hope everything goes well there tomorrow. And maybe next year you can bring that 80-degree weather up here to Boston.
Thank you very much, Warren.